And because I don't want to run out of time, I'm going to start with your assignment first to explain this to you a little bit. So basically, when you come into the Career Development Office for your assignment, and I'm going to go ahead and pass around the sign-up sheet. So if you can pick a time now. If any of these times do not work for you, just call or stop by the office and we'll set something more convenient up for you. So these are on this side. So what I'm passing out is a self-directed search. This is a career assessment based on your interests and abilities. And there's certainly a lot more that goes into making a career decision other than, oh, does it interest me and would I be good at it? And there are tons of things that go into making that decision. But this is probably the most common starting point. What would I like to do and what would I be good at? So this assessment will help identify some potential options for you. Just so you know, there is no assessment out there that will pinpoint the best career for you. All assessments do is give you a starting point. They point you in several directions. So this might be a good direction for you to start looking in, or this might be a good direction. So when you come in to talk about your assessment, we'll look at a list of jobs that you've been matched to, and you may or may not be interested in those jobs, but that's going to be at least our starting point. So if you want to open this up to the beginning, I'm not sure why, but the first page is listed as page 2. Do not worry about codes there, but before you come in, just jot down the careers that you have been considering for yourself. And I don't care if it's astronaut or President of the United States, if you've considered that, there's something about that that interests you, that appeals to you, I want to see that on here. And then basically you are going to go through the rest of this assessment, starting on page 3 there, and it's asking you, do you think you would enjoy this activity? And then you either check like or dislike. And then as you go along for each section, you total up your like responses. So under the activities R, you might have 3 likes, you've got a 3 in that box. Under activities I, you might have 7 likes, you've got a 7 in that box. Be very careful that you're not reading anything into the question. For example, it's asking you, do you think you'd enjoy taking, I think, a mechanic repair course? Take a mechanics course. Don't think to yourself, I don't want to be a mechanic, so no. It didn't ask you if you wanted to be a mechanic. It only asked you if you would enjoy taking that type of course. So if you are answering, oh, I don't want to be a mechanic, so no, you've just skewed your results. It will ask you later on if you want to be a mechanic, and you can tell it no then. You might very well enjoy taking that type of course because you like to know how things work. You like to diagnose problems. So you might enjoy taking that course. And you know what, that's a little bit of a stretch, but if you're answering no to that, and in your mind, oh, I want to be a doctor or a psychiatrist or something like that, well, what do doctors and psychiatrists do? They diagnose problems, just like a mechanic. So you can be skewing your results, so just be careful that you're answering what they're asking. And so they start off with activities you might enjoy, and then they go on to ask about competencies, so what do you feel that you're good at? And you will have to guess at some of these things because you will say to yourself, oh, I've never done that before, I don't know if I'm good at it. Well, I've never repaired a car before, but I'm pretty sure I'm not as good at it. Nor would I enjoy it. So sometimes you will have to take your best guess on some of these. And then it asks you about what occupations do you see yourself in or would you consider for yourself. When you get back to page 11, what you're going to do, all the numbers that you've been putting in those boxes, as you've been totaling your numbers as you go along, they now get transferred to, oh, I'm sorry, not page 11, page 12. They now get transferred to page 12. So under activities R, if you had a 3 in that box, well, activities are right there, in that line you put a 3. And you're just going to transfer all the numbers to this page. Once you've done that, you'll total up your columns. So you'll have a total for R, you'll have a total for I, you'll have a total for A. And then we look at your 3 high scoring letters, and that's what we call your Holland code. So your 3 highest might be S, I, and A. And then once we know what your 3 high scores are, then we match you to some potential jobs. And then there's some other things that we talk about in here because the numbers have significance too. But mostly we're concerned with finding out what your 3-letter code is. And when you get to the bottom of page 12, stop. And then when you come into the office to meet with me, we'll go over page 13 together. So any questions on the assessment booklet? Don't overthink this. How many of you overthink things? Okay, don't overthink it. It should take no more than 20 minutes. Some people will be done with this in 5 minutes, but if it's taking longer than 20 minutes, you're probably overthinking it. These tend to be more effective if you go with your first reaction. Okay, so try to work through it fairly quickly. Great. So when you come in for your appointment, bring this with you. And like I said, it'll be about a half-hour appointment unless you have a ton of questions. We can always schedule more time if you feel like you need more time. But just count on being in there for a half hour and we'll go through the results. So today, I'm going to talk to you about career options. And it's a really common question in my office. I'm interested in majoring in this, but what can I do with this degree? Okay, so it's not uncommon for somebody to be in my office saying, I'm thinking about psychology, but what sort of jobs are available to me if I go into psychology? So what have you all heard? I want to hear from you. What have you heard that you can do with a psychology degree?
Counseling.
Counseling. Now, you would start with the psychology degree. For counseling, you would go on to graduate school, and typically a master's in counseling. Okay, so it's a starting point, okay, but definitely. And as a matter of fact, a lot of my emphasis today will be on what you can do with just the bachelor's degree, but I run all the reports for what students do after they graduate, and psychology majors who go on to grad school, the large majority of them go into counseling, or social work as well. Those seem to be the 2 most dominant. Did you have a?
I'm working in like correctional facilities.
Criminal justice, yes, or investigative careers. Definitely. You see that a lot too. What else have you heard? Yes?
Clinical.
Clinical? Okay, so psychology itself, a clinical psychologist, definitely. Requires a graduate degree for that, but you're really looking at a PhD most likely. Anything else?
Research.
Research. How many researchers in here? How many of you just love the idea of research, discovering? You can start off with a bachelor's degree as a research assistant in some cases. The more opportunities that would be available to you if you go on for graduate school. Any other thoughts? How many of you have heard, oh, you can't do anything with a psychology degree? Okay. They don't know what they're talking about, all right? And I'm sorry if it's somebody that's near and dear to your heart, but they haven't talked to me yet. Okay? And after today, hopefully you can go back to those people if it's necessary and share with them. Here's a lot of the things you can do with a degree in psychology. Right. So I'm going to start broad and tell you some broad categories, and then we'll be specific, and I'll tell you about where some recent Mount Union graduates have gone on to work with their bachelor's degree in psychology. Because sometimes that seems like that's the most real. Well, if another student just did it, then I can do that too. Okay. So I'm going to be broad, at least initially. If we look at the business sector, because I know a lot of people think, oh, psychology, that's just for helping profession, but you can take psychology into the business sector. And so since most people don't think of that, I wanted to start with that. I'm going to be broad, 3 broad categories. The first is human resources, and human resources is the part of the organization that takes care of the people. So they do the hiring and the firing and the disciplining. They do the training. They do the benefits, the employee wellness and employee assistance programs. So really anything performance management, anything that has to do with taking care of the employees, good or bad, falls under human resources. Also in the business sector, really anything that has to do with management or supervision, because as psychology students, you're trained to understand people. And you, the advantage of understanding people is that once you understand them, you can perhaps persuade them, you can motivate them, you can evaluate them, you can select who would be good for this position, who would be good for that position. And those are many of the things that managers and supervisors do. And then client services, customer service, sales, really anything to do with the customers. Okay? Sales is about persuading. Okay? And by the time you're done here, you may not necessarily want to persuade people or enjoy persuading people, but you'll have a better handle on how to do that once you know what motivates people. Handling conflict, resolving people's problems, diffusing a situation. So sometimes when you're dealing with customers or clients, they're upset about something. You know how to diffuse a situation. Okay. Why is this person really mad? This is what they're saying, but you know based on your studies, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And then, not as common, but definitely has some potential, marketing and advertising, because that's persuading people from a distance. It's not persuading you to do something. It's, as I'm talking to you, it's me knowing all about 18 to 22-year-old females, and you read these types of magazines and you watch these types of shows, and this is the kind of message that you respond to. So those are some general business areas that you might pursue with a degree in psychology. All right. Education. And that might be in the public school systems. Now, I'm not talking about being a teacher, because teachers are just the most visible part of the educational system, but there are many other roles within education. Guidance counselors, school psychologists. If you look at higher education, the type of work that I do, a lot of people go into my career field in career development with a psychology background, admissions officers. So a lot of people work in higher ed, not in teaching roles necessarily, but in support roles with a degree in psychology. We mentioned criminal justice, investigations, fraud investigators. Okay, so it's not limited just to working with people in the correctional system already, although maybe probation officers or people who are helping criminals transition out of the system and back into society. There's also the FBI and the CIA. They hire psychology majors. Most common, probably social services and social work, the traditional helping professions. And I won't touch too much on that because I think that's where most people are already thinking. Research, somebody mentioned research, and of course counseling, which somebody mentioned, and psychology. Okay. So those are the general fields. Now, did I say anything that surprised any of you? It's sort of like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, right? Okay, so no big surprises there. But those are some of the options. Okay? Those are some of the most common options. And trust me when I tell you, there are hundreds and hundreds of jobs out there that just require a college degree. The employer wants to hire an educated person, and they're not so concerned what the major is. They just want somebody who's teachable, with good communication skills, and who can problem solve and look at things from different angles. And when you're in my office, if that really intrigues you, you want to know what are some of those jobs, I've got a list, and I'll show you. Any questions so far? All right. Let me tell you where other Mount Union graduates have gone. And we'll start maybe with the less common, things that you don't maybe think about and match to psychology, and then we'll get closer to what you're used to. Now, this is with a bachelor's degree, okay, so they have not gone on to grad school at least yet. Weight loss counselor, so there's motivation involved there. Employment recruiter, retail manager, management trainee, sales representative, internet sales manager, accounting assistant, and I remember that one in particular because I thought, oh, to me that seems like the exact opposite of psychology. They have an accounting minor. Insurance claims representative, computer programmer, and I looked at that one too, and they did not minor in computer science, so I'm not sure where they picked up their programming skills, but they got them somewhere. Police officer, Army officer, college admissions representative, Greek life coordinator, academic advisor, assistant teacher, behavior therapist, mental health technician, case manager, caseworker, and senior activities coordinator. So that's kind of a wide variety. Those are Mount Union students majoring in psychology over the last 3 to 4 years that did not go on to grad school, and that was their first job out of college. So maybe some of those interested you, maybe none of them interested you. But that's something that let's talk about when you come in for your appointment. Maybe you heard that list and you're going, oh, no, there's no hope for me. There's hope for you. We'll discover what it is. So let's talk. Sometimes you make your career decision, especially if you're in psychology or sociology, by the types of people that you want to work with. Let's go through the room. I'm going to have each one of you tell me what year you're in. Like, are you freshman, sophomore? Okay. And do you have specific career plans right now?
Yeah, right now.
Not right now. Okay. And then the third thing I want to know, is there a special group of people that you want to work with? Elderly people. Perfect. Okay. Because sometimes that's the starting point. Okay, what kind of jobs, not what can I do with a psychology degree, but what kind of jobs are out there to work with elderly people? All right, good. How about you?
I'm freshman.
Freshman, and any career plans?
I'm doing counseling.
Counseling, and any particular population?
Village.
Village, or what? Preteen kids. Okay, good. How about you?
I'm a freshman. I want to go into neural research.
Okay, no particular population.
Freshman, some sort of medical area, and particularly as young adults.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm a freshman. I mean, like on counseling duty, and maybe like from like this age, like for counseling, like teenagers.
Okay, teens, maybe young adults?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a freshman and I'm majoring in human development right now, and I want to work with children.
Okay, children in some capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm a sophomore and something in the psychology field, but doesn't matter, like preference age.
Okay.
I'm a junior, and I want to work like in the industry area.
Okay.
I'm a freshman. I want to do anesthesia, and I want to work with pediatrics.
All right.
I'm a freshman, and I want to do neuroscience research. I want to work with children as well.
Okay.
I'm a freshman. I think I want to do counseling to work with
Good. How about back here?
Freshman, I'm considering counseling for like a hospital setting for children with severe illness, like preteens and below.
Good.
freshman, probably want to go to neurology or something like that. No particular age group, though.
Okay.
freshman, I'm also thinking about counseling, and probably anywhere from teens to adults.
I'm a junior, thinking about businessmen/women and working in IO psych.
And working in what?
IO psych?
Oh, okay, industrial organizational, which has very strong ties to human resources. Okay.
I'm a freshman, and I'm thinking about counseling, but I don't have an age group.
Okay.
I'm a freshman, I want to do counseling with children.
Children and families. Okay, interesting, because the focus as we went along was mostly on age group. So, just going to put it out there to you, to all of you, and just answer as you feel. Are there any particular issues that you want to help people work through, whether they're children, adults, young adults, elderly, any particular issues that you want to help them through?
Thinking about doing maybe like addiction counseling.
Okay, addiction counseling. Any other thoughts there? So when we talk about people that you want to work with, or populations that you want to work with, I'm going to try to expand your idea of what's out there and what might be available. Because right now, I've heard a lot of freshmen, so your experience is limited, okay, and that's part of why you're in college, is to expand your experiences and your knowledge of what's out there. So let me give you some idea of some of the populations that you might work with your degree in psychology. And it may be in the helping professions, it may not be. Let's see what they do with the list here. Okay, here we go. Voters, this is an election year, and I guarantee you, on some of those campaigns, probably on every one of those campaign staffs, there's at least one person with a psychology degree, probably more. Because the goal is to influence the voters. Consumers, so I think somebody else said industry back here. You said industry, okay. So maybe you might be targeting consumers, and so you want to understand consumers. Students, so if you go into education. The underprivileged, so I didn't hear anybody say specifically social work. Criminals, victims, job applicants, employees, veterans, the elderly, addicts, somebody said addicts, orphans, the disabled. So do you see how I'm getting specific with some of the populations you might work with? So I'm just planting a seed in your mind right now, giving you an idea of, oh, yeah, okay. Maybe that's a group that I can work with, and this is the capacity that I might work with them. Any questions so far? I think we're doing really good on time. Excellent. All right, let's talk a little bit about your career plans. Okay. Y'all gave me an idea of what you'd like to do at this point. And again, since a lot of you are freshmen, there's a very good chance that some of your career plans will change. You may stay psychology majors the whole time you're here, but you may shift gears. You may decide instead of going this way and do counseling, I might go this way and do politics or criminal justice or go into business. Because a lot happens to change your career plans. A lot of things will happen, just in this 4 years that you're here at Mount Union, but also throughout your life. And before we're done here, I'll tell you about my career path, because very few people have a straight career path where you start here in college and that's your goal and you go right there. That is rarely how it happens. Unless you're an accounting major. Those accounting majors knew since they were kindergarten that they were going to be accountants for some reason. They're pretty straight, but for the rest of us, yeah, it's not such a straight path. It's kind of crooked. So what sort of things? Think about people in your family. What sort of things have happened to people in your family that have change their career path or determine whether they accept a job, change jobs, go back to school? What do you think?
No.
What's that?
Family.
Family, be more specific.
Okay, so like my dad got a job, like out closer, like an hour and a half from where we lived when I was younger. And we were already enrolled in a school district and like liked it out there, so we declined it to stay there until we were older and then took a different job, so we could move.
Okay, so your kids. Yep, you do a lot for your kids. Okay, here's my example of that. When I came here 14 years ago, it was because the job that I took at that time was part-time, 10-month. So I had summers off because my kids were little, and that was ideal because I wanted to have both the career, but plenty of time for my kids. And this place has been pretty family friendly, and so I'm here, I'm full-time 12 months now, but you know what, now my kids are college age. And one of the benefits of working here is college education, so I'm here for a little while. Okay. So yes, a lot of your decisions about your career will be based on your children, assuming you have children someday. What else? Again, think about your family, maybe not your immediate family, could be extended family, could be friends of your family. There's tons of things in your mind. I'm gonna push you guys for at least 2 more, yes.
Well, I just kind of realized I don't like the direction they're going in sometimes.
They don't like the direction they're going in. Their interests change, maybe their values change. You change. You change. And what you want now maybe isn't what you want 10 years from now. Maybe life has slapped you upside the head and you find out that, oh gosh, these things aren't important to me anymore, but these things are. Or maybe you've just been exposed to more things and now you have new interests. Okay, so many times you yourself change. Good. What else? There's no wrong answer to this, by the way. Yes.
Internal and external factors, so like, if you're doing like a profession because someone else in your family or your parents think you'd be good at it, and you realize like, once you're involved that you really don't like that career, you want to do something you enjoy.
Okay, so the people that are around you, whether it's family or friends, they influence you. They definitely do. And I'll tell you, if you do not have specific plans for yourself, if you don't have goals, you're not really sure what you want, you are much more open to influence from friends and family. Definitely. Well, let me tell you about some other things. Marriage. Okay, how many of you plan to get married? Okay. Most of us have, something or have a significant other. So let's say you're married, you get married, things are going along great. You've got your career, your spouse has his or her career, and all of a sudden, your spouse comes home and says, honey, guess what? Great news, I've got a promotion, I'm gonna make lots of money, and we're relocating to California. And you're going, wow. Well, what about my job? I like it here in Ohio. Well, maybe some of us do. So what are you gonna do? Your spouse has this great opportunity. Do you let your spouse go to California and you have a bi-coastal relationship? Some people have done that. I don't think it works very well. That's hard on a relationship. Are you just going to split up because you love your career more than your spouse? That happens sometimes. Okay, hopefully that's not the case. Or are you going to give up your career and your friends and your ties to this area and relocate with your spouse? Or are you going to pressure your spouse to not take the promotion? So your spouse, once it's no longer you, you just add one person into that mix, and yeah. You have a lot of decisions to make. So now it's not just about you, it's about somebody else. Very similar to once you start having children. The job market. Sometimes the job market doesn't cooperate with you. Okay? When you came to college, the job market for your career field was strong. 4 years later, maybe 5 years, you graduate, or if you go on to graduate school, 6 or 7 or 10, and the job market's not the same. You hit the job market, and they're just not really hiring in your career field, and sometimes you have to take a career in another area. And sometimes that turns out to be a fabulous career, and sometimes it's just fine. You're still going to work your way back to your original career goal. But the job market will not always cooperate with you. Health issues, whether it's your health issues or a family member's health issue or a disability of some kind. Very common. How many of you know of people who have elderly parents that they have to take care of? They are responsible for taking care of them. Could be in your own family, right? Okay. Do you take that promotion in California and leave your elderly parents here? Because with the brother or sister that doesn't do anything, that we all have those people in our family. Or maybe you're the only child. So maybe you're tied here because of your elderly parents and their frail health. How many of you know somebody who has a disability? Maybe they weren't born with it, but they have it now. I got to church with a man about 5 years ago. He started losing his sight. Now, he was very fortunate in the company that he worked for. They accommodated him very well. They helped him transition to a job. Now, he still has some sight, but he is legally blind. He can't drive, and he used to drive for his job. He was very fortunate. His company valued him, and they worked very closely with him. And he was very successful in his transition. Other times, you got to find another employer, and you've got to find another career. And sometimes even that's not always possible. You never know when those types of things are going to happen. Sometimes there's a death in the family. Has anybody experienced this? There's been a death in the family. If you feel like it's something you're comfortable talking about, what was the situation?
My grandpa ended up having lung cancer, and he died from that, and the entire family got shifted around and trying to figure out how to take care of my grandma.
Okay, and that goes back to the elderly family members as well. Was he still working at the time that he passed?
No,
He was retired, okay. Anybody else have something that they want to share? They feel comfortable with?
My stepfather committed suicide.
Okay, and that, death is hard enough on family members, but a suicide is even harder. I bet you a lot of people in the family were not focused on work or school, but they were focused on other things. Now, did that affect any other family members in terms of financial?
My mom at the time,
Okay.
because she was still going to school,
Okay.
so it was a really big impact,
Okay.
and it was just bad timing.
Okay, did she have to stop out at all for a while?
No,
No, she
she
was
kept
able to
going, yeah.
go through. Sometimes what happens is, and this is maybe less and less common, but if you're staying home and raising children, you decide to be a homemaker, and your spouse, who is the breadwinner, passes. Now, at some point, especially if there's no insurance, you're going to have to go back to work. And that was not planned. Maybe you were planning to be home for the next 10 years. Well, plans change. And that would be a major issue. Legal issues. Okay, sometimes the legal issue is with you, and sometimes it's with a family member. Probably the closest for you right now that you may know people already. Somebody served alcohol at their party to someone who was underage, and they got caught. And now they have a record, and because it was serving alcohol to someone underage, they may not be able to pursue their teaching degree now because of that conviction. Anybody knows some situation similar to that? Legal problems can affect you if you're going into healthcare. Legal problems can affect you if you're going into perhaps banking, criminal justice. Yeah, a lot of careers. I mean, some people just don't want to hire anybody with any type of legal problem in their background. In other cases, it's another legal issue. I can't legally hire you if you have this type of conviction on your record because, you know, you work with children, or you work with the elderly, or you work with money. Divorce. How many of you know somebody who's divorced? Okay. Okay, first of all, let me tell you, choose carefully who you marry because divorce can really mess everything up. It will affect your career, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And you are always worse off financially after a divorce. I don't care how the money's split up or anything like that. So let's see, what can happen if you get divorced? Okay. Let's go with California again. Your spouse has custody of the children and they relocate to California. All right. Do you relocate to California too so you can be close to your children and see them more often, or are you going to be okay with seeing them maybe a couple times a year? It's a decision you might have to make. I told you divorce is expensive. Okay, you were going along happily, you loved your career, it just wasn't a high-paying career. The split happens, spouse has most of the money, has the high-paying job, you're going to have trouble supporting yourself. You might have to change careers to something you like less because it pays more and you've got bills to pay. So a lot can happen there. Financial crisis or windfall. Can you imagine what would happen to your career if you won the lottery? Think about, just let me poll you right here. If you won the lottery, the big one, but you didn't have to work, how many of you would change your plans right now? A couple of you? What would you guys do differently? What would you do differently? You would move? Yeah. Where would you move to?
Probably Texas or something like that.
Okay, you moved to Texas. Would you still work?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you do the same type of work?
Probably not. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Something to think about. You might win. Okay, how about back here?
I'd probably start a business up.
Start a business. Great. Do you know what kind of business yet?
No.
Okay, good. Keep thinking about that. You might start that business whether you win or not. Back here, somebody.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Probably start a business or find something to like invest in.
Okay. Interesting. You know what I think my dream job would be? I think I would set, if I had all that money, the really big one, I'd set up some type of a fund, you know, and invest it, have the right investments and everything so it would continue to grow. And then my job would be just like, who could I give it to, you know? Just research different nonprofit organizations and, you know, where could that money do the best work? Like Bill Gates has his foundation and he has somebody who runs that. That would be ideal. That would be cool. Good. Now that's on the positive side, but sometimes you have a financial crisis for whatever reason. And I would say it is very, very common that people are working in jobs that they're okay with, but they're not their dream job. And they're in that job because it pays the bills or it pays enough money to take care of whatever financial problem there is. Change in management. Think about this. Have you ever heard your parents come home from work and say, "We've got a new boss and I hate my job," or something to that effect? Does that sound familiar? I see some heads nodding. Yeah, that's happened to me too. It's like, oh, wow. So sometimes you decide, I can't stand working here anymore. Maybe it's the new boss, maybe it's, I don't know, there was a company merger and all the policies and rules have changed and now they're stupid. Or maybe you just have new coworkers or clients that are just nasty. Whatever reason, you decide, I don't want to work here anymore. They can't pay me enough. And you look for another opportunity. So sometimes it's that work environment. We did mention that you change sometimes what's important to you. And then unexpected opportunities. If nothing else out of today, you get out of this discussion, I want you to realize that sometimes there's an opportunity that's going to present itself to you, and it was not in your plan. And it is a good opportunity, and don't dismiss it outright. Now, eventually you may dismiss it, but don't dismiss that opportunity outright. Look at it, study it, think about it. It may be the best opportunity of your life. Just because it isn't part of your plan doesn't mean you shouldn't seize that opportunity and pursue it. So if nothing else, yeah, don't turn down a good opportunity just because it wasn't. I mean, it might be something you didn't even know. I didn't even know a job like this existed, but it sounds fantastic. Wow. And I can afford to take that job. And then I can do this, and then I can do that. So keep an open mind about things. Don't get so, your focus so narrow that you can't see all the good things that could be coming your way. Any questions about anything that I've mentioned? Or does anybody disagree with something that I've said? Because it's okay to disagree. Still doing good on time. Okay, let me tell you about my crooked career path. And then I think your professor might be able to share hers too. Yeah. So, I knew my whole life I was going to be a teacher because I loved school. I liked my teachers, I liked the school environment. School came easy to me, so I got good grades. It was a great experience. So I knew my whole life I was going to be a teacher. I got to college, my first semester took Intro to Education. They enlightened me, and I realized, holy cow, there's all this other stuff that goes along with teaching. It's not just working with the kids, and I have to deal with that. I want nothing to do with that. Okay, so I wasn't even done with my first semester of college, and I was already, okay, I've got to come up with a plan B. And luckily, I did have a plan B, because I knew if for one reason or another teaching didn't work out, I was going to take care of orphans. Orphans are near and dear to my heart. They just are. Okay, so I switched my major to social work. And while I was in social work, I found out they don't have orphanages anymore. Okay? There are some temporary places where orphans might stay, but basically in this country, foster care is what happens to orphans. Okay? Foreign countries might have orphanages, but for the most part, those don't really exist in the U.S. anymore. So my whole idea of taking care of orphans was a little different. But that was okay because I still had a passion for orphans. But as I was in my social work class, working in group projects with other students, just listening to the discussion in class, everybody I was in class with was so angry. I have never met such an angry group of people in my life. Many of the people in my class had been in the system, grew up in the system, and hated the system. And by the system, I'm talking about generally welfare or something like that. And they were angry, and they were out to change the system. That's why they were going to school for social work. But they were so angry, and their focus was just this. And they could not see past their anger. And I'm thinking to myself, this is one of those aha moments. This is the type of person who's going to be my coworker. Now, not everybody in that class was angry, but the majority of them were, and I thought, you know what? This is not what I want to get into. This is not people that I want to spend, 40 or more hours a week surrounded by. So I thought, okay, I need to come up with something else. So I tried business and took some business classes and liked my advertising and communications and public relations and things like that. Okay, business could be it. And then it's like, oh, but there's all this math, quantitative business analysis, and math is not my thing. I could do it, but I hate it. And so to make myself do it, it just wasn't going to happen. And somebody pointed out to me, okay, well, Sarah, if you have to take that much math in the curriculum, don't you think that you're going to have to do that much math in the job? Okay, you might have a point there. So what do I do now? I ended up landing in communications, okay, which I could still pursue advertising and public relations and things like that with communications. And I knew almost immediately I was in the right place because the students who were sitting in class with me, when I'm listening to the class discussion, it's like, yeah, I agree. We were all kind of like-minded. You know, we weren't robots all thinking exactly the same way, but I was more like those students than I was with the education majors, than I was with the social work majors and the business majors. I felt like I fit with this group to begin with. And I enjoyed the classes, and the classes came easily to me. I did very well academically in those classes as well. And I realized, yeah, I can pursue the type of career I want with a communications degree. So it took me a while, okay, and I had to take some summer classes and an extra semester, so I was there for 4.5 years, you know, with those summers. Okay. But for the most part, I pretty much graduated close to on time. So I hit the job market with my communications degree. I was going to go into marketing and advertising, and then I couldn't find a job in marketing and advertising. Now, there were a couple of secretarial jobs that were offered to me, but that's not what I went to school for. I went to school to be the advertiser, the copywriter, not the secretary. And I thought, okay, well, you know, this is what I want, why would I settle for that, especially if there's no career path to get to where I want. So I kept looking, and while I was looking, you know, I needed to pay some bills. So I got a job with a temporary agency, and I went on some temporary assignments, and I got a paycheck every week for doing that. And while I was doing that, I ended up in a bank. To me, that sounded so boring, banking, that's numbers. But I landed in the human resources department. And while I was there, I really enjoyed what I was doing. I talked to the different people in the office, and I'm like, that looks interesting, that looks interesting. I enjoyed the people I worked with. I enjoyed the type of work I was doing. I liked what I saw other people doing. And while I was there, they fired this woman. And I had been watching her not do her job. Thought, oh, I can do that better than her. So they fired her. I applied for her job, and I got it because I'd been there several months, and they knew me. And they knew my work ethic and that I fit in, and I showed up for work. That was not my plan. So my first real job out of college was working in human resources, and I got to hire people, interview people, and participate in orientations and some training, handle some employee problems, because human resources is kind of the complaint department, and I really enjoyed it. It was not part of my plan. And so I went along for a while, and then I changed. I found some other interests, and I think maybe more the motivating factor at that point was it was fine, I enjoyed it, but I wanted to see what else was out there. I realized I was always wanting a new challenge. So I started looking in the help wanted section, and I saw a job for a transfer and career advisor at a local college. I can teach people how to go on interviews and what mistakes not to make and things like that. So I applied for that, and I got it. So I enjoyed that job. And my boss told me, if you want to pursue a career in higher ed, you need to get a master's degree. I said, great. I'll get a master's degree in human resources so I can go on in higher ed, or if I want to go back to human resources, I can do that too. Got my master's degree. In my mind, I always thought I was going to go into human resources. I was going to go back. Never did. Never did. I found my niche in higher ed. Like I said earlier, it's been family friendly. I was starting my family at that time. It's just where I feel like I'm helping people reach their goals rather than the company reach its goals. So I found my place, and yeah, there are certainly other careers, because I see them all, other careers that if I needed to, I would probably pursue, but for now, this is really where I feel like I belong. So it was not a straight line. I did not go to college thinking, someday I'm going to work in career development at a college. Wasn't even on my radar. But that's just sort of how it happens. And it happens that way for more people than not. It's not as common for people to say, I'm going to do that, and I go right there. So, Christine, did you want to share Mine's kind of a long story.
I am actually going to share my story when I do. So we have all of the disciplines kind of that correspond to the text that we're using. So I will do that
Okay.
when I come in. But thank you.
All right.
When I'm
All right. I think those are all the big points that I want to cover today. I don't feel the need to maybe throw too much information. What kind of, whether it's about anything I talked about for the last 45 minutes, 50 minutes or so, do you have any questions about that, or do you have other questions that are related to career or grad school that you want to bounce off of me? Yes.
With working with the business field or potentially going into human resources, where would you advise a place like would be to intern at? Like what type of, like, would a business office or a career development office?
You will be able to find human resources internships. You find less IO, and those are usually more reserved for graduate students, but any internship that's labeled as human resources, and that could be in a nonprofit organization or it could be in a business, because most organizations with 100 or more employees probably have somebody who handles the human resources function. And if you are interested in trying to find an internship in that area, if you come see me, I can give you some resources for that, maybe show you a few websites to go to. Yeah, I mean, half hour at the most, 15 minutes, most likely I can show you what you need to know. What sophomore?
Junior.
Oh, junior. Okay, so you could do something this summer. Are you planning to go to the job and internship fair on Tuesday?
Yes.
Good. I'll see you there. Let me know if you want to prep for that.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions?
could you give? Oh, go ahead.
Most people that major in neuroscience here when they graduate, what typical careers do they have coming out of?
We don't have a lot that necessarily major in neuroscience, and that's relatively recent. I would say that I can remember most of them go on to grad school, and I've seen maybe research assistant comes to mind, but I can't say that there's a whole lot. When you come in for your appointment, if you remind me, I can look up over the last couple of years and see specifically like what graduate programs they've gone on to and that sort of thing. But research assistant, I remember seeing that one for sure.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.